It had been a long week, filled with work, responsibilities, and the constant shuffle of our busy lives. I thought I knew my wife, understood her moods, her habits, her laughter, the little gestures that always reassured me. But that night, everything felt off. She left the house with a careless smile, saying she was going out with friends. But I had seen the texts, the secretive glances at her phone, the nervous energy she tried to hide. Despite my instinct screaming otherwise, I pushed the feeling aside. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was overreacting, that everything would be fine. I couldn't have been more wrong. Hours passed. I waited, pacing the living room, checking my phone obsessively, trying to distract myself with music and work. But every sound from the hallway, every vibration from my phone, made my heart race. Then the realization hit, like a thunderclap. She wasn't coming home that night. Every tiny clue I had ignored now screamed at me. A cold dread settled in my chest. I imagined her laughing, holding someone else, sharing moments that should have been ours. My hands shook, my stomach churned, and a storm of anger, disbelief, and heartbreak built inside me. When she finally returned the next morning, she expected an easy reconciliation, a smile, a shrug, maybe even laughter to smooth over her absence. But I wasn't the man she thought I was. I stood in the doorway, calm yet unyielding, bag packed, ready for a decision I had been wrestling with all night. No shouting, no begging, no dramatics, just quiet, resolute determination. I watched her approach, expecting perhaps a guilty grin, a flustered apology, maybe an attempt to charm me back. Instead, her confidence faltered when she saw my expression, a face she had rarely encountered, detached, serious, and carrying the weight of a final decision. I closed the door on her slowly, deliberately, feeling the click of the lock echo like the drumbeat of finality. I told her calmly but firmly that we needed space, that her actions had crossed lines that couldn't be ignored. She tried to convince me it had been just one night, to downplay what had happened, but the words didn't land. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I turned away and began reclaiming my own life, my peace, my sense of control. For a moment, I believed shutting the door, cutting the night from our lives like a cauterized scar, was enough. Days passed in a blur of silent reflection. I buried myself in work, friends, routines, anything to avoid the ache, the empty space she had left behind. The pain remained, deep and insistent, but I thought I could handle it. I had drawn the line, set the boundaries. A fragile sense of power returned, the idea that I had stood firm, and perhaps she would finally understand the gravity of her actions. I told myself this chapter had closed. I was wrong. Then the phone rang, a simple ring. Nothing dramatic at first glance, but I knew immediately it would change everything. My heart sank before I even picked it up. The voice on the other end was calm, distant, almost clinical, but every word cut deeper than I could have imagined. I learned things I wasn't prepared for. Secrets, confessions, betrayals she had hidden in plain sight. The careful facade of control I had constructed began to crumble as I realized the full scope of what had been happening. Everything I thought I knew, everything I relied on, shattered in the space of a single conversation. I sat frozen, gripping the phone, trying to process shock, heartbreak, and anger all at once. The betrayal was no longer just a one-night mistake. It was a web of deception I hadn't seen coming. The finality I had felt when shutting the door was replaced by helplessness, disbelief, and a gut-wrenching pain that left me nearly paralyzed. Even the walls of our apartment, once a sanctuary, seemed to close in, echoing the weight of what I had just learned. Life, as I had known it, had irrevocably changed. The person I had trusted, loved, and built a life would have been living a double reality, and I had been blind until that call. The rules of our relationship, the foundation of respect, trust, and honesty, had been a lie. Now the true consequences were inescapable. I couldn't unhear the confessions, couldn't unsee the evidence in my mind, and couldn't undo the heartbreak that had been carefully orchestrated behind my back. For hours, I sat in silence, letting the shock and devastation wash over me. Thoughts of confrontation, revenge, or closure crossed my mind, but words felt meaningless. I realized painfully that this was more than a betrayal of one night. It was a fracture that had weakened the foundation of our entire relationship. The finality of the door I had shut earlier now seemed symbolic, a boundary I could never retract, a line defining both an ending and a beginning I wasn't ready to face. I felt small, powerless, yet oddly aware of the strength I had once relied on to stand my ground. By the time the call ended, I was left with nothing but silence and a heavy understanding that life would never return to what it had been. That one night, that one careless act, and the revelations that followed had changed everything. I had thought shutting the door marked the end, the limit of my heartbreak and patience. But in truth, it was only the beginning. The call had shattered me in ways I couldn't have predicted, leaving me to navigate a world where trust no longer existed, where love was replaced by doubt, and where the person I once believed I knew had become a stranger in my own home.